What up? What up? Coming to you live from my parents' house. We got episode 33 of the Changavi Show. Those of you that are new, welcome in. My name is Anuj. I am your host. My last name is the name of this show, so you should probably know that. I got a fresh haircut and I got fresh stories. So we're right here on the mic giving you guys all of the latest. No, not the latest, but some of the interesting stuff that I've been noticing and wanting to talk about. So let's get right into it because we got a big show and not a lot of time. So let's go. Let's talk about me first because I'm egotistical like that. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. Listen, I'm doing pretty well. School is kicking my ass. Midterm season is upon us. I always remember the NFL draft last year because I had 3 tests the next day. And then this man, Trey Lance, was selected with the 3rd pick in the draft last year by the San Francisco 49ers. Last year's draft day was a stress. This year's draft day is not a stress. And I'm recording this a couple hours before the first round of the NFL draft is set to kick off. But I'm not feeling stressed at all because we don't have a top 10 pick, or maybe we will with Deebo Samuel. I don't know. A lot of mystery for the 49ers, but that's a topic that I don't necessarily want to talk about because it's not on the schedule today. And we got a thickie of a schedule. That was a weird word. I don't think I'm going to use that. But geology has been kicking my ass, bro. The professors out here are being very rude. I think they're forgetting that the pandemic is still going on and people, need their fucking time. But I don't know. I've had some rude professor interactions the last few days. If y'all have any advice on how to get through that, feel free to DM me at the Changavi Show on all social media platforms. That is my life update. Not much going on for me. So let's get right into the topics that we got. We got 5 topics, really good ones. And I want to start with the music one first because there is an industry in music right now that is really just, in my opinion, I just see it everywhere. It's overtaking a lot of things. And it's really the first foreign music craze to overtake or to really have a significant impact here in American pop culture. So let's talk about K-pop and the phase. I know I've been advertising this topic a lot recently on Instagram. I've been doing a lot of research into it. So I thought I would break it down for you guys because it's truly a really interesting industry, and the rise that it's had in American pop culture and around the world, and how how South Korea's main export has been music, and how they've developed it into a system that can be fucked up and dark, but at the same time is developing one of the most interesting things in pop culture right now. So let's get into it because there's not a lot of people that really know what K-pop is unless you're a big stan here in the States. So what the hell is K-pop, right? In short, let me explain to you. It's Korean pop music, okay? K-pop stands for Korean pop music. If you didn't know that, now you know. Boom, mind blown. But let's go through the basics. How the hell did K-pop get to being this multi-billion-dollar industry that it is today? Good question. So the whole thing with K-pop starts way back in 1987 when South Korea basically reformed back into a democratic government. So they used to be kind of a hybridized monarchy is the best way I like to think of it. They were like different republics. They weren't, they had a confusing governmental structure, but it eventually reformed into a democratic one and the democratic government that we see today. So something that hadn't really been done and really focused on was the entertainment industry because there were like 2 channels in South Korea that you could watch under the Sixth Republic. And so entertainment wasn't necessarily a high priority amongst its citizens. But then in 1987, when it was a democratic government, people were like, wait, we can like artistically create stuff. So all of a sudden there was this huge artistic revolution in South Korea, and the music industry that was all but non-existent a few years ago was suddenly having a major boom. And in the 1990s, there used to be these talent shows in South Korea that, are kind of like what idols, like what you like to call American Idol. But these idol shows in South Korea were quickly becoming the most popular shows in the whole country. Everybody was talking about it. They were broadcasted throughout the country. It was like the shit. And those sort of talent shows / idol shows sort of showcased a lot of the musical talent and bands that became really the foundation of K-pop. But the first song to really showcase the modern day sound of K-pop, because before it was a lot of, covering South Korean old traditional songs and stuff like that. But the first song / band to really showcase that modern sound that we hear, where it's that American sort of sound, not American, but Western sound of music mixed with Korean lyrics, is a song called, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Nan Aroyo. And it's AKA I Know. That's the English translation of the Korean title. And the song was by this band called Seo Taji and the Boys. This song, man, I listened to it and it sounds a lot like the Korean Backstreet Boys. This is very 1990s, but it was sort of the first song that you could hear sort of American and Western influences overtake in this Korean music. And Seo Taji and the Boys were like the first main Korean pop band to like really start singing about teenage angst, and they sang about the issues that they were having, whether it be in like educational or love or whatever, right? Like classic American boy band, Western boy band issues. But in Korea, they'd never heard it before. So it was like a cultural revolution of sorts. And people saw the rise in this band in South Korea and how popular they were, and saw that they were really changing the game. And so the music industry saw that these idol shows were creating these acts that were, very lucrative at the time. So they started making music studios and music entertainment companies like SM Entertainment, JYP Entertainment, and YG Entertainment, which have become quickly some of the biggest studios, music companies in all of South Korea. But how did we go from South Korea being like a countrywide thing, or K-pop being a countrywide thing, to an American thing? Okay, so one of the initial foundations of how K-pop became popular was way back in 1999. There was a band called Hot, and basically what Hot was it was Korea's version of One Direction. They were on a show similar to The X Factor, and they sort of meshed well together. They were created by the judges, and eventually, they, I guess, placed really highly in the show and started releasing music outside of the show that started to gain a lot of popularity. And American music executives noticed this and were like, whoa, there's something big going on here in Korea. And so they were hand-selected by music executives in America to perform at an international benefit concert with Michael Jackson. And one of the reasons that they were selected was because these executives were like, these could become the next global superstars. Of course, Hot never really got the career that they were expected to get by these American music executives, but it was sort of the first introduction, dipping the toe into the water, if you will, of Korean artists going into an American and Western sort of setting. So how are these K-pop stars found? How is it like America, where you can post a video and the music does really well and all of a sudden you're a K-pop star? Not really. So remember how I said a lot of the K-pop stars, at least in early K-pop and even now, but lesser so, were found on these sort of idol style shows like the South Korean Idol and stuff like that? Well, there was a whole system that sort of developed around these idol shows, because there was a system so that basically engulfed all of the hopefuls that hoped to land on one of these idol type shows. And what was that system, Anuj? Let me explain it to you. So basically what happened was these K-pop stars were forced into this system where they would practice intensely within these academies, kind of like SAT prep academies, except for singing. And so they were so they basically were in these academies where they would practice singing and dancing for like 13 hours straight until like 10 or 11 p.m. without interacting with anyone. And the thing is, a lot of these kids in South Korea, at the time, art was like, what the hell are you doing, right? Like, why are you making music? This isn't a lucrative career. This is a culture that is very focused in its education. It has one of the best education systems in the world. There's a lot of stuff going on in regards to the culture and academia. And so a lot of the kids feel the need to perform at the very highest level possible because their parents and their families and their friends and society would look super down upon them. So there was this huge need to just intensely perform if you were going to do the idol academies. And a lot of parents didn't actually support this. And so the trainees would go to school in the morning and then just do this idol academy for the rest of the day. And the thing is, these studios weren't necessarily supportive of the acts, because a lot of times the studios and the agencies forced dieting upon these forced dieting upon these singers. They forced plastic surgery. There was often sexual harassment complaints from a lot of the women that were involved in these agencies or in these academies. And all of these things sort of were forced upon these people because in promise of a chance at making it to the top and of making it to the top of South Korean music and K-pop. And so remember how we kind of talked about conservatorship, because we talked about conservatorship in an earlier episode, right? And if someone's going through a mental health problem here in America, sort of the parents or a trusted guardian would gain access to their assets. Well, in South Korea, it was a similar thing, except it was the studio system that would gain access, because their hopes were in South Korea that they would sign these idol singers young and they would just blindly sign away contracts. But in reality, they wouldn't know that they were signing a large percentage of their earnings back to the studio, which is rough because there's a dark side to K-pop. And I'm kind of pointing this out. This whole studio system is it's pretty freaking dark if you think about it, right? K-pop, it's producing this amazing global export and it's blowing up everywhere. But this system still exists. And it's a system that's eerily similar to like early Hollywood and what's going on in China with the Olympics. And so with executives and, people high up in power controlling the talent and the talent really having no sort of say or empowerment in their own careers, which is rough. And it's really sad to see. But it's going to be interesting to see if social media sort of breaks that system because, the system is no longer needed. You can, one of these acts can post a beautiful song on TikTok and all of a sudden get 40 million followers. And now you're looking at a whole different career, right? You're looking at a career that could be financed by an international fan base and a fan base that perhaps doesn't exist. Or a fan base that exists online rather than developing a fan base through these Korean idol shows and through this sort of old school way. And fun fact, even BTS was sort of assembled by this studio system and sort of this idol system that I've talked about. So it's kind of interesting. BTS is one of the biggest K-pop bands. For those of you that don't know, they've worked with bands like Coldplay and they've worked with Halsey before, a lot of big American artists. Anyway, let's get back to the American thing, right? Because how the hell did they become popular? So for years, the South Korean studio system has sort of dipped their toe in the water to see if some of their bigger artists in South Korea would have a chance in America. And for a long time, K-pop was just a subculture here in the US. So a lot of the artists kind of stuck to their niche and had a limited American fan base, to say the least. But a couple of acts that really started to do well in the mid-2000s were BOA and Rain. And they started to have a little bit of success in America. Rain was actually the first Korean artist to sell out a theater in New York City. But his career in America didn't necessarily take off because of the fact that he actually had to go do mandatory military service. So his career kind of was stalled, and then he came back and I don't think was ever the same. And BOA actually was the first Korean artist to make the Billboard 200 list, which meant that K-pop was cracking American mainstream, which was something that hadn't really been heard of at that point. And then there was a group, fast forward a few years, called Girls' Generation. They released a song called G, which was huge in South Korea. It's quoted as one of the more modern K-pop sounds and has songs and has originated sort of this new sound of K-pop. It's really big in terms of the influence of Korean music in terms of K-pop. And Girls' Generation tried to come to America, but their album flopped. They were on all the late night shows. They were trying to get their press out, but the album flopped, didn't even make the Billboard 200, and it didn't do well. So their expedition into America ended. So there was a lot of trials and tribulations of people who found a little bit of success, and then they failed. And then there was another band called the Wonder Girls that was similar to like Girls' Generation with the whole like all girls aesthetic. And they got to open for the Jonas Brothers. They gained some traction through that. But then eventually their American career faded as well. But then there was a guy that we all know by the name of Psy. And Psy was the first Korean pop artist to blow up in America, and Gangnam Style. For those of you that know, pretty much everyone knows what Gangnam Style is. And that act was the first, and that song was the first song to put K-pop on the map in America. Made sure that like everybody and their mothers knew what K-pop was. And then you started to build these, and then around that same time, you had social media that was rising and a lot of artists rising through social media, building fan bases online. So you had the early versions of Twitter stands starting to come out. And you know how it is once you get those Twitter stands, man. The rest of the world really isn't too far behind. And then the last sort of K-pop band to really just break the floodgates wide open was BTS. They really opened the genre for real to Americans because they were the first artists in Korea. I didn't actually know this, but they were some of the first artists in Korea to actually talk about issues that mattered. And they were like very socially conscious artists when they first started. And that sort of helped them blow up because they ended up winning top social artist in 2017 at the Billboard Music Awards. And that like blew them up in the US. And BTS allowed groups like Blackpink, which is another Korean pop group, to really blow up as well. And Blackpink is the first group in Korea that kind of took the Frank Ocean approach because they have albums and they're like 6 or 8 songs each, and they've released like 2 or 3 of them, and that's it. So they don't release all that often. They release music in limited quantities, but it's allowed them to build these huge fan bases. And also, these songs have just gotten play after play after play that they've been so popular. They collabed with American artists like Selena Gomez and Cardi B, and their fan base has grown massively. In fact, it's grown so much that they were the first Korean pop artists to perform Coachella back in 2019. So they headlined Coachella, and we're going to talk about Coachella a little later. So it's quite the road to get here for them, which is kind of crazy. And it's quite the road for Korean artists to really have a say in American culture. You know, you think of BTS, you think of Blackpink, you're like, oh, they just kind of came on the scene 5 years ago. But there was this whole list of other artists that had to come and fail in America in order for the BTSs of the world, the Blackpinks, the Twices, to really have the success that they've been having here in the US. Who are some of the biggest names in the K-pop industry that have penetrated Hollywood? Let me go through this real quick. So the ones that I know are BTS, Blackpink, Twice, and of course Psy was, huge. But BTS is the one that's mostly everywhere. That's the one that everybody knows. Blackpink too, a lot of people do know because they've, worked with Cardi B, Selena Gomez, like I mentioned earlier. Blackpink low-key got some bops though, dude. Blackpink is low-key kind of hard. They got some like music that you could dance to, bro. Like I'm surprised they're not. Are they in the clubs? Like I don't go to clubs, but like Blackpink should be there because their music is really vibey. I think it's actually pretty good. K-pop surprised me, bro. I'm not even gonna lie. Like when I first started this segment, I thought it was gonna go one way, and then I started learning about the studio system, and I was like, holy shit! And then I started like listening to the music, and I was like, whoa, this is actually kind of different, and this is kind of boppy, and it kind of makes you move. But yeah, anyway, like K-pop traditionally, as we know it today, has a very American sort of pop sound. The sound is very influenced by Western music and modern influences that are kind of, we know as Western music today. So the beats are relatively dancey and they're kind of catchy tracks. But there isn't really a difference between, I would say, K-pop and American Western music, other than the fact that bilingualism is included in some of the songs. So, you get Korean lyrics and you get an English chorus. So that's kind of cool. But what's unique about K-pop is actually the dancing and sort of the production quality of its music videos. The music videos are what really has been big for K-pop. The dances are choreographed very elegantly. And the thing is about K-pop artists is they're also big time dancers too. So they're very, very talented in terms of choreography and dancing and like kind of all of that. Because normally like here in America, right? Like when you go to a concert, besides like Beyonce or any of these big artists, like you go to a rap concert, they kind of just like stand around the stage and they rap and they move around and they're like, yeah, right? But like in Korea, like they actually have routines that go along with these songs at the same time. So it's like a Super Bowl halftime show every time you go to a K-pop concert, which is kind of cool because you don't really get that here in the US. And how has K-pop sort of influenced pop culture in America? That's another question that came to mind when I was thinking about this entire topic. And for one, I mean, it's one of the first foreign sort of music brands to really blow up here in the West, if you think about it, right? Like, look at Bollywood. Bollywood, to its credit, is obviously a huge brand that's being listened to by a lot of people. But there's like one song every 15 years that blows up in America. Bollywood songs are never on the radio for a reason, right? And my thing is, why I kept trying to rack my brain. Like, why does K-pop have the appeal it does? And then I realized something. K-pop is old school in a lot of ways because it's still this boy band / girl band culture, which really isn't seen in America in a lot of ways. It's kind of a throwback. And a lot of Americans really fuck with that sort of vibe because if you know a lot of Americans here, they're really into their old boy bands, Backstreet Boys, all of these different bands. BTS is kind of the modern version of that. Twice is kind of the modern version of that. Like, I don't know. And I can tell you this, like a lot of my friends from the Bay Area like flew all the way out to Las Vegas to go see Twice because I think that was one of their only American performances. And like Blackpink and BTS were huge in high school. Like, everybody was listening to it. That being said, I did go to a very Asian high school. So, and I grew up in a very Asian neighborhood. So it does make sense. But like, I don't know, because I'll tell you this, there's this hella weird subculture of K-pop. It's not weird, but like there's this group of like Indian and like Mexican guys who are hella into K-pop. They're like obsessed. And like, no hate, because I just got in, I started listening to some of Blackpink and I was like, I see the appeal. No hate. But like, there's like a big group of like brown boys. I'm talking all sorts of brown that are into K-pop. It's very present. And it's definitely created this very interesting subculture because I think the appeal of like American music is that old American music was that it was very rooted in band culture, and K-pop is very similar to that. Right now, there's not a lot of like solo artists. It's a lot of groups. Blackpink is a group. BTS is a group. Twice is a group. These are the groups that are really having the success on the American stage. And my question and my interesting question is like, does the rise of K-pop mean that foreign music is going to be more easily accepted here in the United States? Maybe it is one of those things, but honestly, time's going to tell, right? Because there are a lot of cultures that love K-pop, but are other foreign, I would love to see other foreign music brands really have the success, maybe Afro beats, Bollywood, of course, but I think what's interesting about K-pop is that they've been extremely flexible. They use a lot of English hooks in their songs. They use a lot of modern beats. They're very open to the West. And so that has allowed them to have success in other countries because other people in those countries can resonate with that sound because it's very similar. And so that's why I believe K-pop has had the major success. And I think it's not a phase, and it's here to stay for a really long time because K-pop is flexible, and they've proven to be more flexible to the American crowd. And listen, the studio system is fucked up, right? Like we talked about how artists are being sexually abused and forced to diet and have plastic surgery and all these things. And it's terrible, terrible. And that should be called out 100%. But it's producing some of the most talented artists in the world. I mean, they're going to academies and training to become the best. And I'm not defending the studio system. I want to make that very clear, but they are creating some of the best artists right now. And I think K-pop has this unique ability to sort of merge the past with their boy band aesthetic, but also a modern sound together, which is something that's super appealing. I mean, look at how this generation ate up One Direction. We don't really see very many boy bands anymore, right? This generation loved 1D. Concerts were being sold out. One Direction made millions. And K-pop's is capitalizing on that same interest now. And I think, in my opinion, like K-pop's real catchy. They've been open. It's a lot of fun. It's boppy, it's cool. And the thing is, I'm noticing this. I think Korean culture, there's almost a full wave that's sort of taking over, right? There's been such a rise in popularity of K-dramas and in Korean pop and in Korean barbecue and all of these things. And all of it is having an effect on each other, and they're all bouncing off each other, and they're getting more and more popular, which is cool, right? As Jack Harlow says, and my barbecue Korean and my shorty moi bien. Sorry, that's the line I thought about. It's one of my favorite Harlow lines. But anyway, enough of that. But I think this is one of the first times we're really seeing a foreign brand, besides reggaeton, have heavy success. K-pop artists are having millions of streams in America. They're selling out arenas. Like, it's crazy. So I hope to see other cultures, other foreign cultures, take over the mainstream real quick, because you're going to see a huge wave come up. And that's the coolest part of the whole situation, in my opinion, is that you're going to see this huge new sort of foreign wave potentially come up. Anyway, we got a bunch of other topics to get through. And I'm going to transition from K-pop, which I've talked about for a while now, to the forgotten sitcom. Anuj, what are you talking about now? Okay, you talk about shows every week. I've kind of decided that I really want to do a topic that just is me talking about a show. And so this is kind of where I want to, the show I want to talk about this week. And here's my thing. right, is what, like, there's so many sitcoms, in my opinion, that have gone under the freaking rug because of more popular sitcoms. And so the shows have been quickly forgotten about. So what is the show, in my opinion, that is a fun sitcom that was absolutely forgotten about? One word: Scrubs. It's the show that was freaking popular when it was out, but everybody has forgotten about it. Everyone has forgotten about it. So when did the show happen and what was the cultural impact? Okay. This show took place from 2001 to 2010. So right in the middle of like the biggest sitcom era, arguably in America, besides, maybe the 80s and the 90s. But you had How I Met Your Mother, you had Friends, The Office, all of these sitcoms. Parks and Rec started in 11. So it fell off to the wayside because it was surrounded by these shows that are considered downright classics in today's society. But in my opinion, Scrubs could be one of the classics because the cultural impact was that this show brought the setting of medicine and the setting of a hospital to life, and it made it funny. It was one of the first shows that made a serious medical, like a lot of medical shows that you see are very like, oh my God, he's dying and we need to rescue him and it's 911 or like NCIS New Orleans or whatever the fuck NCIS show is, right? But this is one of the first shows that really tried to make the medical setting funny. And when this show is hitting its stride, it does it beautifully successfully. It's great. It's elite success. And this is one of the only shows that, in my opinion, balances these three things extremely well. It balances extremely stupid, serious, and humorous all at the same time. And it does a really good job of that. And hot take, a lot of people love Grey's Anatomy. They call it one of the best medical dramas in the world. Scrubs is 50 million times better. Scrubs is better than Grey's Anatomy. So how did Scrubs get forgotten? Easiest question. Grey's Anatomy. There's a show called Grey's Anatomy that started in 2004. It's run for like 600 years. And it's a show that just blew it out of the water because it had a bunch of hot characters in it. That's really what it came down to. And it's also more of a dramatic show. And being surrounded by some of the best sitcoms as well as Grey's Anatomy, this show kind of was super popular within its fan base, but it was insulation of popularity. It wasn't really mainstream at the time. And in today's generation, Scrubs gets called like one of those shows that's just, oh, it's another medical show. It just gets pigeonholed as one of those like 911s or those like NCIS shows. But in reality, it's so much more than just one of those NCIS kind of types of shows. And viewers don't really recognize the true realities of it. So that's why we bring it out here on the Changavi Show. That's why we talk about it and we discuss. So what is this show about? The show is about residents, like medical residents and their experiences in a hospital, sort of rising up the ranks, encountering mentors, love, relationships, all that stuff. Anuj, that's Grey's Anatomy. That is literally Grey's Anatomy. Okay, fine. Okay, you know what? Fine. The plot is it's Grey's Anatomy, very similar to the plot of Grey's Anatomy, but it's much funnier. And it's not just people fucking each other all the time. It's not just people hopping into relationships for the sake of the show. There's also much better characters, in my opinion. There's one character called the janitor who I think is absolutely fucking hilarious. He carries the show. He's hilarious. He's so funny. And also JD is one of the characters that really reminds me of myself. He's one of the few characters that I've actually seen that like sort of resonates. And sort of Scrubs is one of those shows that uses daydreams extremely well. They do a really, really good job of that, which is I haven't really seen on TV all that often. So that's kind of cool. Stars of the show. Who are the stars of the show? Zach Braff, John C. McGinley, Sarah Chalke. I mean, so I'll go through it. Zach Braff isn't really in much TV, but John C. McGinley, you'll probably recognize when you see his face. Sarah Chalke was Stella on How I Met Your Mother. Neil Flynn was this guy by the name of Mike Heck on The Middle, if you've seen that show. And Krista Miller was on Cougar Town. So if you know her or any of her stuff on Cougar Town, she's pretty funny. And she's also funny in this show. Is this show good? It is better than Grey's Anatomy. It is amazing. Watch this show because a lot of medical shows are hella mid. And I understand the sort of contingency of like I don't know, Grey's is kind of the number one in that genre. No, Grey's is not the number one show in the medical genre. Let me tell you that right now. It's a fucking soap. Grey's is a soap. Scrubs is an actual TV show, and it does a way better job of teetering the dynamics of a medical hospital way better. Certified Changavi banger. Yes, that's right. You saw it. I looked right into the camera. Certified Changavi banger, okay? So go watch it. It's available on Hulu. You can search up Scrubs. All the seasons are there. Don't watch the last season because it really falls off. I don't know what they were trying to do. But other than that, every season is significantly better than the one I've watched of Grey's Anatomy. So watch Scrubs if you like that 2000s vibe of TV, a different style of humor, balancing all sorts of weird elements of things. It's really good. I promise. Okay. That's all I got to say about Scrubs. So let's move on. Let's move on from Scrubs and me being hyper talking about television to Sadhguru. What a fucking transition, Anuj. I know. I'm the GOAT. So listen, the Sadhguru came into my mind because, and for those of you that don't know, I'll explain who Sadhguru is. But Sadhguru came into my mind because J. Cole shared something on his Instagram the other day and said he didn't know about this. And Big Sean, like a few months ago, shared something on Twitter about meeting with Sadhguru and his recent movement. And my mom is hella big into Sadhguru. So why are J. Cole, Big Sean, and my mom talking about the same person in his movement? That's when you know something is relevant. So who the hell is this guy and what is he doing? So who the hell is Sadhguru? Well, I guess the best way to describe him is that he's a spiritual thought leader and someone whose perspective is very valued within the spiritual community, as well as his perspective on consciousness and spirit and all of these things. He's been teaching yoga since the 1980s, really, in southern India. And he's come into popularity recently for a lot of the humanitarian sort of movements that he's tackled in the last few years. For a long time, he actually lived off the profits of his small-time farm, but now he's becoming this sort of humanitarian guy. So he's moving around a lot more. One of the things that I've known him from are like the Isha Foundation, which is his nonprofit, something that my mom is very into, and a lot of aunties around the Bay are very into Isha. So I've known him from that for a long time, which is his nonprofit, the Isha Ashram, which he founded way back in the 1990s in Coimbatore, India, and then he opened one in America in Tennessee. And his way of thinking and his sort of nonprofit has been a huge hit with not just Indian people, but people all over the world. They've traveled to his ashram in Coimbatore, and they've traveled also to the one in Tennessee. So when it comes to spirit, and the thing is, like, listen, when it comes to spirituality, like I'm not one to talk. That's the one subject I will avoid because I have absolutely no opinion, and I'm utterly spiritually confused and religiously confused. So I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'll stay away from kind of the spiritual stuff. I'll talk a little bit about it, but not much. But I'll start talking about Sadhguru as a person because Sadhguru as a person is really good, man. He's done a lot of really nice initiatives that are humanitarian related, and those issues and the way he's sort of raised awareness around it is really interesting. So let's get into it, right? Because he's relevant, in my opinion, for the two things. The first one is, we've talked about it, the fact that he's able to blend some of these ancient spiritual traditions about consciousness with and yoga and all of these things, and combining that with sort of the modern day obstacles that come with those things. So he's kind of a hybridized guru in that way. That's those video clips of him talking and discussing his philosophies have become really popular. The second reason why I think Sadhguru is really relevant is the fact that his humanitarian causes are so have attracted the attention of the world almost, because a lot of people have come forward and supported him and really gone forth and had a lot of success with these ventures. So what are some of the things that Sadhguru has advocated for? Sadhguru actually started by sort of trying to bring yoga and spirituality to villages and the more rural areas of India. And as a result, he's sort of helped empower the local leadership within these communities. And he's sort of gone through a rural, how do I describe it? It's sort of like a rural rejuvenation, because he's focused on building these communities up and then focusing on the spiritual side of things. So it's not just bringing in his sort of movement, but he's also trying to help these communities thrive, because a lot of communities, rural communities in India, don't have a lot of structure, and they're headed by a lot of people who are very corrupt. So he's helped in that sense. He's also helped tremendously with education in India, particularly with people who don't have access. So he's built a lot of schools around South India and has made sure that a lot of kids in these parts of the world that are struggling have opportunities for an education and are doing things that are more productive than what they probably would be doing if they didn't have those options. In addition, though, his most recent movement is what has resonated with American pop culture, which is he's saving the soil. This is his new thing. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but his Save the Soil movement has really attracted the attention of a lot of different people. So how has Sadhguru become, why is J. Cole and Big Sean and all these American celebrities talking about Sadhguru? To be honest, there's not a lot of people that really know who he is. But the thing is, he's continued to reach out and work with influencers and rappers and content creators, and anyone that really has a significant platform. He's willing to have a conversation with, and so he's had conversations with all of these different celebrities about this movement, which I'm going to talk about right now. So basically, what is the Save the Soil movement? So according to Sadhguru, and what he's been saying is that soil is constantly being degraded because we abuse it so much, because we have these machines that are consistently producing agriculture and are trying to like basically overproduce food. So we've been overproducing food for years to the point where we're basically abusing the soil. And according to his website, 54% of the oil, according to the United Nations, is it 54? No, my bad. Sorry. It's a third of the soil in the world has already been degraded. And he thinks that that number could eventually increase to 90% of the soil in the world being degraded by 2050. So that's the UN report to Sadhguru. And he's basically been on this huge press tour talking to absolutely everybody and anyone that will listen about what's going on in regards to the soil movement and bringing this sort of message and this issue to the table in the conversation. And so I respect that. And so as a result of the Save the Soil movement, Sadhguru has set off on a 100-day motorbike journey from London to India. He started, I believe, a month or a month and a half ago, not exactly sure when, to raise awareness about this issue. So he's going to be meeting all sorts of heads of state, political party leaders, all of these things to talk about this movement and talk about maybe potentially bringing in some policy initiatives as well. It's really funny, actually, because he's this like 65-year-old guy, like driving his motorcycle all throughout Europe, meeting with heads of state and really having these discussions. And I think that's really, really awesome what he's doing, because soil regeneration is not something I understand from a scientific perspective, but I understand that it's important because there are a lot of people out there with agriculture and all of these things that are abusing the soil. And frankly, what his point is we need to make the world a better place for the future generation. And I'm with that. I'm definitely 100% with that industry. And Sadhguru talking to rappers is something that, like, I never thought I'd be saying that sentence in 2022, but Sadhguru talking to rappers is really cool because you have guys who are really at the top of the music game. Guys like J. Cole, Big Sean, people who are, big people who are coming out and really supporting Sadhguru and putting their hand around, their arm around this movement and saying that, like, yo, this is like the rap community is behind this issue. And when you have leaders of the rap community that are talking about this issue and are behind it and that are pushing this, it's kind of cool to see hip hop unite over this soil issue, because it's really an issue that, regardless of party lines, like affects everybody, right? Because food shortages will affect everyone. And I was listening to the Daily Show interview that Sadhguru did with Trevor Noah, and they were talking about how the soil really is, like, it's going to affect, it's not just like countries in Africa that are going to be fighting civil wars over famine, right? The poorer countries, like, it's going to be people in America as well. Not civil wars, but if there's going to be food shortages in places like Chicago potentially in 2050, if we continue to use the soil like we do. And Sadhguru is really bringing this message out and just saying, like, let's take gradual measures to make sure that this is an issue in the future. And this is the foundational sort of trickle down effect that it could potentially have if we don't do anything. So it's really kind of cool to see this guy who's 65 years old riding around on a motorcycle throughout Europe and the Middle East, spreading this issue to all sorts of people. And the fact that my mom, J. Cole, and Big Sean are talking about the same thing is very funny, in my opinion. So if you guys, I will link Sadhguru's Save the Soil website down below so you guys can get some resources, figure out what's going on with this whole entire thing. And yeah, I definitely want to talk a lot more about this because it's a very interesting issue, and it's a guy that I've known for a little bit, but didn't think that he had the influence and the clout to be able to do some of the things that he's doing. And listen, Sadhguru and Isha, right? Let's talk about that real quick, because we talked a lot about Sadhguru and his movements that he's been doing with humanitarian stuff. Sadhguru is an Isha. Isha is not a religious movement, according to their website, right? And Sadhguru is seemingly actually a guy that just wants to live life. He lets his beard out, he lets his hair out, he rides motorcycles, he loves all that. He's climbed mountains. Like this guy's he's pretty cool. But to me, where it gets weird is the way that sort of they've built statues of like Shiva and Hindu gods at their ashram in Coimbatore. That doesn't make sense to me because of the fact that like he is supposed to be non-religious, but yet Shiva is very deeply associated with Hinduism. That doesn't really make sense to me. But I guess like he's a spiritual figure. I don't know. I don't know why he built that statue. That part confuses me a lot, especially considering that they're claiming they're a non-religious organization. I would love to be educated on it, and I would love someone to come at me and say like, this is why. And also like, but at their core, like I do appreciate what they do, right? They do a lot of yoga. They do a lot of meditation. They're trying to spread positivity into the world, and we could use that. So we all need a little more peace and control of our minds. But that's really how I feel though about Sadhguru and what he's been up to recently with the Save the Soil movement. I will link it down below. You guys will have all those resources available to you. And hopefully we could spread this message, because what Sadhguru is doing is really cool. Okay. Listen, I'm going to talk about one more thing, and then we'll do a little bonus episode. I've made a decision that I'm going to do a little bonus mini episode sometime this weekend. And we are going to call it a day after this topic. Coachella. I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, can you buy me tickets to Coachella next year? And she was like, hell no, but I'll buy you tickets to Sadhguru's ashram in Tennessee. And I was like, oh, maybe. Would you guys want to see a podcast from the ashram? Is this content that you want? I don't know. Yeah, my mom was like, no, I'm not buying you tickets to Coachella, but I'll send you to Tennessee. Whatever. Listen, anyway, Coachella. Last year, Astroworld happened, right? And that was a huge disaster that took place, but everyone's casually forgotten about it. Coachella made a fuck ton of money this year, and it continues to make a fuck ton of money. So what the hell is the hype around Coachella? What is going on? What is happening in Coachella? Coachella, for those of you that don't know, is a music festival that sort of takes place around the end of April every year. So although the last couple years they haven't really had this music festival because of the pandemic, why is Coachella? Anuj, why are we talking about Coachella? Because Coachella is frankly the most hyped music festival of the year. And what's cool about it is there's all sorts of these subgenres and artists that get their moment in the sun who probably wouldn't have that moment if Coachella didn't exist. Maybe it would be another festival. I don't know. But Coachella has gone from just, like it's a music festival to this all-encompassing, huge pop culture event. And you have things like fashion and like paintings and celebrities there and A-listers and massive art installations. Like it's a huge deal. Everybody talks about Coachella for a reason. It's a huge pop culture phenomenon. It's an 1.5-hour drive from Los Angeles. Everyone goes there. It takes place in Palm Springs, Indio to be more specific. So it's really warm. So a lot of people are really attracted to that energy and that vibe. And it takes place in the middle of the desert. So it kind of has that Burning Man aesthetic to it as well. But what does this have to do with Astroworld? Okay, listen. Astroworld last year, a few people, unfortunately, and we talked about this on the show, a few people, unfortunately, passed away due to the rowdy environment that took place and was created. There are a lot of people to blame, Travis Scott being one of those people, because he continued to encourage this rowdy behavior while he was on stage and performing, and people were telling him to stop the concert because it was getting a little too crazy. He didn't do it. Also, a lot of people were being extremely ridiculous and jumping on cars and just not taking care of everybody, making sure that everyone was okay. Combination of a lot of things, point is, led to the disaster of people unfortunately dying at a music festival, and this music festival of Astroworld being canceled. It was the music festival gone wrong. And everyone was talking about it for about a week. And then everyone was like, oh, okay, that's over, move on. Travis Scott's uncanceled. But everyone forgot about it because Lollapalooza happened. Austin City Limits happened. A lot of big music festivals have happened, come and gone, and everything's sort of gone without a hitch. Everything hasn't really been, hyped. because it was hyped for about a week. We were like, oh, we need music safety and all these things at festivals and blah, 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 blah. The music festivals, in my opinion, really haven't done much in terms of to see this preventing it from happening. Although the mistakes were preventable from happening. So maybe they are, because I haven't been to a music festival recently. But in my opinion, they haven't been very clear with what they've done. Coachella, though, what's lucky about Coachella is it's much more spread out. So it's a lot easier to prevent this kind of stuff from happening. So what did Coachella do to prevent Astroworld from happening? Well, one, they banned Travis Scott from the festival. They canceled him out of the lineup. So that, is a message. And also their grounds that they run Coachella on are like 50,000 acres. Like there's a bunch of, not 50,000 acres, but it's a huge piece of land. A lot of people are spread out. There's, people are doing things other than listening to the music. And a lot of the music that they play at Coachella isn't conducive for moshing. So in my opinion, there isn't going to be that sort of Astroworld type aesthetic that you have. And music for a lot of people isn't the main attraction. A lot of these people go to the festival because they're working, because they're really trying to network. They're trying to find people. They're trying to rub shoulders with the right people, the A-listers, to get invited to the after parties, all of these things. No one gives a fuck. Like the music is a secondary for a lot of people that go to Coachella. A lot of people go to Coachella to work. It's interesting. Travis Scott's Astroworld Festival is really just like one stage, have a good time, rage, and that's it. But what is so special about Coachella? It's truly the influencer capital of the world. You have 2 weekends to make connections, get invited to parties, and for the ordinary person, it's their one chance to sort of be like, whoa, I'm in Hollywood now. Like we're big time. And sort of they want to make you feel like you're at the pinnacle of pop culture, that you're making a significant impact. And for only the small price of $450, you can get invited to Coachella. But listen, Coachella is a wide variety of things. And I'm going to talk a lot about that on the bonus episode because my computer is about to die. So this was it. The Changavi Show, episode 33, is under wraps. Thank you guys so much for listening. I had to cut it short because my computer is dying, unfortunately. But I promise, I will be back. Bonus episode coming this weekend. Don't worry. Trust. And we'll be back. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed the episode, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, feel free to hit the follow button. If you are on Apple Podcasts, leave me a review. You can also leave me reviews on Spotify too. So leave me the 5-star review if you liked it. Leave me a 1-star review if you think I'm a fucking bitch. I don't care. But if you want to leave me anything, go down there, check it out. Do all that stuff. Follow me on social media. That's going to be linked down below. Sadhguru is going to be linked down below. So go check him out. And that's all I got for this episode of the Changavi Show. Episode 33 is in the books. 46 minutes. Oh, short. Damn. But bonus episode coming this weekend. We'll talk Elon Musk. We'll talk a little more Coachella. We'll do all that shit. So do not worry. We got a bonus Changavi Show episode coming this weekend. All right, guys. I'll see y'all later. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's truly an honor to be able to do these. And I'm sorry I had to cut it short today. Yeah, I really am. I'll make it up to you. I promise. All right. I'll see you on the bonus show this weekend. Thank you guys so much. Peace.